Welcome, everybody. Today, our special guest is Twyla Teitzel, and she is very knowledgeable about the connection between food and your brain. And I have been wanting to find someone to share this information on this podcast probably since I started the podcast. So I was so excited when I met Twyla, and she agreed to do this interview. So thank you and welcome, Twyla.
Thank you so much, Jess. It's a pleasure to be here.
So tell us what first sparked your passion for nutrition, and how did you start the connection between nutrition and neurodiversity?
Great. That's a great question. I've been somewhat interested in nutrition, I guess, all my life. I've been a vegetarian for over 50 years, and then several years later, I went vegan, and then after that, I went whole food plant-based, which is a lot different. That was a big switch. And at first, it wasn't like an animal rights thing or anything like that. It eventually turned into, oh yeah, I can see the animals suffering. But I just felt so much better. Once I gave up cheese and dairy products, I just gosh, I feel really good. And so going to whole food plant-based, then I started studying it a lot. I started studying the neurodiverse brain connection and nutrition when I was offered the job at Meristem. I also work at a place called Get Set Up, and it's a place for older people to continue learning. So I was asked to give some classes on brain health and Alzheimer's and nutrition. And I realized that a lot of the studies that Dr. Dean Ornish was doing, a lot of the research that Dr. Greger was quoting, a lot of the different research that Dr. Will Bulsiewicz of Fiber Fuel that he was doing, the Alzheimer, autism, same sort of thing. It's still your brain. And they're calling the gut the second brain. There's a nerve. Now, you're from Las Vegas. This is called the vagus nerve. It has nothing to do with Las Vegas. That goes from the gut to the brain. And what they're discovering, and Dr. Ornish has had he just completed a 3-year study on this. What they're discovering is that if it's healthy for your gut, it's healthy for your brain. Because what is not healthy is the chronic inflammation. And it's the chronic inflammation that can then manifest itself. Maybe it's type 2 diabetes, which they're now calling Alzheimer, type 3 diabetes. Maybe it's autism. Maybe it's stroke or cancer or something like that. So they're finding that the healthier we eat, the healthier our brain. Dr. Neil Bernard has wrote a great book called Brain Power, all about how food, and he quotes a lot of scientific studies, food and the connection, again, with the gut-brain connection.
So what you're saying makes a lot of sense about what I've always thought is true, is autism is so much more prevalent today, probably because our food quality is not as good as it was 50 years ago.
I think that's a great point, Jess. And one of the articles that I'd love to quote, it's from Zonia. And Zonia completed 7 or 9 videos. It's a docuseries that they have. And one of the doctors from there talked about how unhealthy school lunches are, all the heavy metals we have there, and the brain development, the microplastics. Ultra Processed People is a fantastic book that talks about the brain and what all these toxins are doing. And what Chris Van Tulliken says is that if it comes in plastic and has at least one ingredient that you don't recognize could be in your kitchen, then it's an ultra processed food and you shouldn't be eating it. And one of the quotes that he has is that in the last few years, more and more studies have been providing conclusive evidence that your intestinal health is directly related to your cognitive performance. And as somebody once said, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn says, there's no such thing as junk food. It's either junk or it's food. And a lot of these foods that we say that we're consuming, our body does not recognize that as food. Michael Pollan, in a few of his books, has always said the quote, if your grandmother, or in some cases for our younger generation, if your great-grandmother would not recognize it as a food, don't eat it. Dr. Michael Greger says, let me give you a hint, let me give you a class on how to read labels. Don't buy anything that requires a label. So you think about that when you go to the store and buy things, you're reading all these labels. There was another quote that said, as soon as we were brainwashed into counting calories instead of counting ingredients and chemicals, that's when the fast food industry really took over. So I think that's really interesting. And we're finding, again, more and more things, the different levels of toxicity in food is just growing exponentially, especially here in the United States, even compared to some of our European counterparts.
It's funny because I was just at a luncheon today and a lady was talking about products that she sells. And she's like, they're all American made. You know, if you eat this and you eat that, you can order from me. They're all American made. And I started thinking, I don't know if that's a good selling point anymore because our government doesn't regulate as much as some of the European countries.
They've said that, I think there was a YouTube about it. The Fruit Loops that are allowed in the United States and the Fruit Loops that are allowed in the UK, ours look like bright neon, just as bright as your lipstick compared to in the UK, where everything looks they're using food grade colors as opposed to all the artificial colors used in the United States. So, and I can't even believe in this day and age, we're still allowing high fructose corn syrup into our food. To me, that's just like that, no pun intended. That's been a no-brainer for a long time, Jess. That should have been out a long time ago.
Right. Well, and Nutella in this country is not the same as Nutella in another country.
Not at all. That's true. That's so true. And I used to, when I was younger, I'd ask my dad, this doesn't make any sense. How come, when I fill in the blank, he said, anytime it doesn't make sense, the answer is money. For instance, why would we allow high fructose corn syrup into because when I was young, I can remember I loved ketchup, but it was just tomatoes and probably some sugar. But even sugar gets a bad rap. Sugar is if you're going to compare the two, sugar is much better for you than high fructose corn syrup and some of those fake sugars. It's just, ridiculous.
Yeah.
We'd like to take a moment to thank our amazing sponsors who make this podcast possible. First up, we have 3D learning experts. If you or someone you love struggles with dyslexia, dyscalculia, or similar learning differences, 3D Learning Experts is here to help. They specialize in virtual tutoring for students of all ages. From first grade to adulthood, their expert tutors use the proven Orton-Gillingham method for language arts, structured and sequential program for writing success, and a multi-sensory approach to math. This ensures students enhance their reading, writing, spelling, and math skills in a way that suits their needs. Empowering students with confidence and success. That's what 3D Learning Experts is all about. To learn more, visit 3dlearningexperts.com. And when it's time to unwind, why not escape to fabulous Las Vegas with Casa Arce Vacations? Whether you're planning a quick getaway or a family reunion, Casa Arce Vacations offers 4 unique stays at one convenient location. Just under 3 miles from the Strip, choose from a cozy tiny house, 2 stylish studios, or a spacious 4-bedroom, 2-bath unit. All guests have access to amazing amenities, including a play pool, putting green, barbecue, fire pit, and each unit has its own private patio. Perfect for any occasion, they've got the ideal spot for your next adventure. Start planning your trip today at facebook.com/Casa RSA Vacations. Thank you to our sponsors for their support and for the incredible services they provide. Now, let's get back to today's episode.
For those who may be new to the idea of healthy eating and gut-brain connection, what is the most important thing, especially for a neurodivergent individual?
Well, I've done a lot of research, and I think one of the things we really need to focus on is diet. A long time ago, I don't know if you've ever heard of Dr. Feingold, but he was doing his diet, taking out artificial colors and artificial flavors when it came into trying to help children with ADHD. Dr. Doris Rapp also did the same thing. She said it's usually not one thing that causes it, but it's a combination. She said it's like your bucket overflowing. So the more we can get out ultra-processed foods, I am plant-based, so I don't eat meat or dairy or wheat or gluten or anything like that. But just cutting out the processed foods is a huge start. Cutting out high fructose corn syrup. Again, sometimes it'll have to be general and taking slow steps. But if you can add more and more fruits and vegetables and some supplements too. Now, Dr. Joel Furman, who he heads Nutritarian Diet, he says that the best supplement for our brain is omega-3 fatty acids. And I do trust him. I do use his supplement. There's other doctors, Dr. John McDougall and Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, they are not too big believers in supplements. But even Dr. Greger of nutritionfacts.org recommends a B12 supplement and also an omega-3 supplement for brain. But I thought it was really interesting in one of the latest articles that Dr. Greger reviewed, talking about broccoli sprouts and broccoli microgreens and its direct correlation in helping people with autism. Only 2 tablespoons of broccoli sprouts or broccoli microgreens a day, and the positive benefits it showed in autistic young adults. And I thought, whoa, that's excellent. So I took this research to Meristem and I tried it out with some of the teachers. And all I did was I put 2 tablespoons of broccoli sprouts in one smoothie and the other smoothie was plain. I had the students and the instructors taste them. They could not tell the difference. So even some of the students were like, oh, Twyla, can you teach us how to grow microgreens? Can you teach us how to grow sprouts? And I'm like, sure, we can do that. And so I thought it was interesting. And Dr. Greger has always said, plants over pills. Try the plants first. One thing about this, Jess, is when you decide to do something like overhaul your diet or even take some positive steps, what's going to be the negative consequence? Nothing. Any single drug that you put in your body, it's going to have a side effect. Now, Karen Ramsey, who wrote the book, and maybe you've heard of her, Heal and Prevent Autism. I don't know if you've seen her book, but she has natural solutions that work. And this is a great book. She runs retreats. She has a lot of positive testimonials on her website. It's all laid out here. And then this book by Dr. Adam Scholes, MD, who talks about autism and herbs. And he tells you actually how to grow your own. He says this book provides help and hope by explaining how. Now, some people, they don't like to say how to cure autism because they say it's not really a disease, it's just something. But I think what his focus is on how to help with some of the symptoms of autism, like maybe cognition and focus and things like that. So the child with your child autism with herb supplements, which have no side effects, the differences between various types of autism, and delivering the lowdown on behavioral, educational, medical, and other interventions. It's a great little book. I don't know where I picked it up, but it's by Dr. Adam Scholes. And then, of course, the staple, the Bible of all the books, and that's Dr. Will Bulsiewicz, who wrote Fiber Fueled. On and on again, all the studies he does talks about the brain connection to your gut connection. You need more fiber. Dr. Will Bulsiewicz recommends 30 different varieties of fiber every week. When I did my in-person class, I said, come on, you guys, roll up your sleeves. We're going to do 30 different varieties of fiber for 2 days. Luckily, none of us shared a bathroom. Okay, that's the first thing. But also, and we did it because I say to my students, 6 S's to success. I want you to think about stews, soups, salads, smoothies, stir fry, and sauces. You can hide a lot of vegetables in all those. You can put a lot of fruits in all those. So there was one person when she was commenting about the study with broccoli, and that study was done by Dr. Jed Fahey. And what she said is that her son has a hard time just eating sprouts. This other comment, one woman, she said, when I let my son start growing the sprouts, that's when he started eating them. Mm-hmm. And then this other mom said, well, I still have to hide it in smoothies. But I think there's a lot of ways to incorporate this good nutrition without thinking, oh, my kid's never going to go for this.
You know, there's a couple of cookbooks I bought when my kids were younger. It's Jerry Seinfeld, I think.
Yeah, Jerry Seinfeld's wife. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and it talks about sneaking vegetables into your meals. And, you know, the kids could never tell. I would freeze the pureed vegetables and then pop them in when I made things. So that was a nice little trick.
That's great. And I know my grandson, well, he's always been plant-based, but sometimes when you add greens, he's not too fond about a green smoothie, but when I add cacao powder, which has actually been shown to help the brain, then it looks like just like a chocolate milkshake, you know, and so then he'll drink it because sometimes looking at it or the texture of it, and they say, you know, what the textures that bother some autistic people might not bother others. So obviously no one knows your child better than you know them, and you will know what works for them and what doesn't work for them.
For my household, definitely texture has been a big thing. And I never ate beans because I didn't like the texture of beans until recently I started eating beans. And now it doesn't bother me at all. I even added beans into brownies I cooked or baked recently. So it's crazy.
I make a great brownie. It's an Instant Pot brownie I make because I give Instant Pot classes. But I want to make sure people understand. It's an Instant Pot brownie. It's not an Instant Pot brownie. Do you understand the difference? It's made with beans, okay? Beans are probably the most important food you can eat. All cultures, all generations have always eaten some forms of beans. And I made up a little song. I'm sure you've heard the song before, but I changed the lyrics. Beans, beans, the magical food. The more you eat, the better your mood. The better your mood, the better you'll feel. Let's have beans for every meal. And I say that because if you follow Dr. Michael Greger, he recommends 3 servings of beans every day. Dr. Furman has G-bombs, and Dr. Greger considers a half a cup to be a serving. So we put them in your smoothie. There's a great YouTube influencer out there. She talks about how she's lost 38 pounds by drinking smoothies made from beans because of the fiber, and it fills her up and it's very satiating. Dr. Joel Furman says every day for brain health, heart health, gut health, we need G-bombs. And his acronym is GBOMBS. That's greens, beans, onions, berries, mushrooms, and seeds. I think I did the mushrooms and berries backward. Mushrooms, berries, and seeds. He says G-bombs every day. He said when you make a salad, if someone doesn't say to you, whoa, that's a big salad, you need to make it bigger and you need to eat it. And I thought, and he's one of the healthiest people I know. He's got a great series coming up, but he also has a great podcast out there. He does it with his daughter, Jenna, and he talks about not just the importance of consuming those foods, but actually some sort of chemical thing goes on in our brain when we chew our food more thoroughly, chewing our food.
And we're in such a hurry these days. We just
gulp it down.
Scarf down our food.
And I can tend to be guilty of that. I mean, sometimes if I'm driving someplace, I'll be eating my potatoes and mustard in the car, and I'm like, oh my gosh. But, so that's not a very good example. But taking the time to really, that's where we bring some mindfulness into it, is chewing our food and swallowing it. And then really, my mouth starts watering when I think of something, and really make sure that we're getting everything out of it. Because that chewing, it's better for our digestion. It's better for our gut, it's better for our heart, and then, of course, it's better for our brain. Now, Doctors Dean and Aisha Sherzai, who wrote the book, How to Prevent and Reverse Alzheimer's, same sort of studies, Jess. What can we do to help the brain? Not just eating, but also exercising too. So I'm not just saying eating is the only thing. There's a lot of different factors that go in supporting the brain. But, of course, I tend to think diet's the first place that we should start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and hopefully our children are still getting enough exercise. I mean, I don't know if they're getting that anymore.
I don't think so. I think, and again, I think it's really interesting too, where they've done the studies that have shown the decrease in brain with the more brain activity, with the more time that is spent on your phone. I'm a member of Fair Oaks Rotary, and just recently we had the DA on there who does the human trafficking. And she said, there's one thing I'll tell you to do that it's best for your children. Don't let them have a cell phone. And I think of that. I think that's great, not just because of the trafficking and stuff, but also for your brain. And even though I won't say it's an addiction, but I am starting to love AI for a lot of different reasons. I'm starting to think, man, Twyla, use your creative brain. You don't need to look at everything, because I used to make up poems for everything. And now I'm like, I'll have them make a Dr. Seuss type poem when an employee is leaving. I'm like, okay, use your brain, use your brain. So keep that brain active. And that's another thing that the Sherzais say for autism or for Alzheimer's, we need to keep our brain active.
Hmm.
And I think what helps is when you can find something like, for instance, the Autism Dietitian. She's got a great website. It's just wonderful. She's got great blogs on there, and she talks about a lot of different things and talks about especially getting the gluten out and getting the dairy out. Dr. Bernard wrote a great book called The Cheese Trap, how dairy and the chemicals they put in it are addictive to our brain. And it's interesting because people who have dairy issues can then go, again, we're talking about Europe and the UK or Germany, and not have those issues. Same thing with wheat, same thing with gluten. I have a friend who went to France. She goes, I can eat all the sourdough bread there, but when I get here, I can't eat it.
I was going to say it's funny because I don't eat dairy and I don't eat very many carbs. And so I want to go to Italy and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do while I'm in Italy about eating. And someone said their cheese is so different than ours.
Exactly. Cheese. You can eat a lot of ratatouille. Hold the cheese. Yeah, you can do it. And then, so the Autism Dietitian, she talks about making sure we get enough protein. And there again is when she really stresses the beans. I think it's interesting too that I don't know if you've ever heard of this, when they talk about the body and how or food and how it relates to what part of the body. And over again, I see so many positive studies that talk about brain health and walnuts. And that's because the walnut looks like your brain, when you open it, and they say carrots are great for your eyes because when you cut a carrot like that, you see all the iris and all that. Now, I don't know if that's true. That's something that, it's kind of fun. Kidney beans, good for your kidney, different things like that. There's no science to prove that, but I find that interesting that they would say walnuts are probably the best part of all the nuts to consume if you're talking about brain health. But the component that's so important in the broccoli sprouts, in the microgreens, in the cruciferous vegetables is the sulforaphane. And that's what Dr. Greger looked at when he was doing when he was researching all the studies, was the sulforaphane. And since I grow my own sprouts and microgreens now, there's actually a company called the Sprouting Company, and they make a super high concentrated level of the broccoli. It's especially for people that are maybe dealing with cancer and going through chemo, but I know a lot of other people who have used it and says it's really helped with their brain fog, their cognition, memory, and things like that.
Wow. What is the company called?
The company's called The Sprouting Company by Doug Evans. I don't make anything off this. Any books that I'm promoting, I don't make anything off of, full disclosure. It's called The Sprouting Company. Again, he's going to sell you his sprouting kit. I use mason jars with just a screen. He, of course, says his is better. But I do like his blends because that way I don't have to have 5 or 6 different jars of sprouts going. I can have the broccoli with the lentils and the high concentration of sulforaphane. Now, when Dr. Furman had the sprouting guy on, he talked about adding some more broccoli sprouts because he wanted that brain protection, adding more broccoli sprouts even to his mixes. But that's just his way of doing it. You don't have to. But yeah, the sprouting is fun. I think that everyone should do it. You could have your own little farm. So even if it's freezing outside, you can still, Doug Evans, the person who started it, he lived on just 6 cups of sprouts, like every day for a month or something. So his story is incredible. Jess, he developed this company called Juicero. Have you ever heard of it? The Juicero? No. I had never heard of it either. And it's some company where he would sell natural frozen cubes and you just put them in your smoothie. And then, of course, he sold the appliance. It went bankrupt. He lost a lot of money. And so then he said, how am I going to survive? I don't even have enough money for food, and started growing sprouts and just found all the benefits of it.
Oh, wow.
And now he and Dr. Jed Fahey are doing a lot of studies for that very particular reason of what sprouting and microgreens can do to help your gut, which is going to help your brain and help your heart, help your immune system, help your overall health.
That's so interesting. And, it's just, you definitely do a lot of reading. It's great that you can share the resources that you've found this information in, because there's so much information out there. You just don't know what is beneficial.
And that's such a good point, Jess. But sometimes I have so much information, I get them, maybe too overwhelmed. I think the point is, if we can start with one thing, that's what I started. I started being a vegetarian over 50 years ago. I just looked at my plate. I go, I can't eat meat anymore. My mom's like, what? I go, I can't eat meat. She goes, well, I'm not going to make you food. I go, no problem, Mom. I'm making 65 cents an hour at Dairy Queen. I got this handled. And so I would still have milkshakes. And then later, as I said, then the dairy, I could feel myself getting dizzy after dairy. So I cut out dairy. And then I started doing all this research. So it's just one of the things that I find really fun and interesting. And I just know people say, well, Twyla, you haven't cured yourself from any major disease and you've never really had a weight problem, which I hearken back to when I was voted the fattest baby in Shasta County. And I did win a prize for being the fattest 1-year-old. But regardless of that, yeah, my mom entered me. Can you imagine entering a contest where you're proud that your kid was the fattest kid in Shasta County? All right. Anyway, we were taught to eat sugar on our tomatoes and our cottage cheese. That's my goal is to come back as a hummingbird, Jess. I don't know if there's such a thing as reincarnation, but those pretty flowers and sugar, I'll be all set. But what I found is that, I'm pretty old, and I know the statistics are out there that people my age, the average person is taking at least 7 pharmaceuticals. I take none. And I have a busy schedule. I get up at 5:30 to take a shower and start teaching classes between 7 and 8, then go to my full-time job. Then I still have Rotary. I'm still a Nana. I'm still on the board for Dovia. So I still have a lot of different activities. And I think the reason is because of my lifestyle. But people have said to me, well, you haven't cured yourself of a chronic disease like Dr. Brooke Goldner, who's cured 2 autoimmune diseases by drinking green smoothies. Dr. Brooke Goldner, or I haven't lost a lot of weight. Some people like Esther Loveridge, who wrote the book Donuts to Potatoes, how she lost over 127 pounds by eating a potato diet, not strictly a potato diet. But just for me, I saw my dad die of a major heart attack at the age of 62. That was 2 years after he had quintuple bypass surgery. I saw my youngest sister die at the age of 52 because of the lifestyle choices that she made. I saw my mom suffer for the last 20 years of her life on full-time oxygen, on a full-time walker. Just when she died, she weighed 96 pounds. Wow. My sister weighed her pharmaceuticals, the drug she was prescribed, 6 pounds of prescribed pharmaceuticals. Do you know how much capsules weigh? To have 6 pounds of leftover prescribed medication? That's just huge. I don't want that for anyone. I don't want that for anyone. And so that's why I have the passion for it. Not that it's affected me directly. No, I didn't lose 126 pounds. Well, maybe I did when I was a kid. I went from the fattest baby, but and so I want to feel good. People say, what's your why? Obviously my grandkids, but I don't want people just my age to suffer how my parents did and how my sister did.
Well, and you probably haven't cured yourself of anything because you've been eating right most of your life. So you haven't filled your body with all these toxins that most people are filling their bodies with before they go the direction of eating right.
And that's so true. And that's one of the hardest things, because I liken it to your laundry or your car or your house. Prevention and maintenance, that's huge. Whether it's for our teeth or whether it's for cleaning our house or, looking at that pile of laundry I have, prevent it. Don't let the laundry pile up. Don't let the bills pile up. Same thing. I don't want the toxins piling up. I don't want all that junk food piling up. And yes, I admit, when I first became vegan, I was a junk food vegan. I was living on Diet Dr. Peppers, 8 Diet Dr. Peppers a day, and Mrs. Fields cookies. So there, you can still have an unhealthy vegan, and I'm here to attest to that. But once you start going whole foods, that changes the game. Maybe you've seen the movie The Game Changers that talk about that very thing. Maybe you've seen the movie Forks Over Knives. Maybe you've seen What the Health. Maybe you've seen the book Ultra Processed Nation. If I could recommend one book, two books. Okay, maybe 3. Okay, I'll limit it to 3. Ultra Processed People. Chris Van Telken writes with a great sense of humor, and again, just talks about how that is affecting us so much. Brain health, gut health. Dr. Furman, who wrote the book, How Fast Food is Killing Us. And I saw this interesting meme. It said, whoever put the S in fast food was a marketing genius. Because if you take that S out, what do you get? And so then again, even though it's not directly related to autism, because it's an Alzheimer's book, and again, I think they're so correlated because it has to do with the brain, I really recommend Doctors Dean and Aisha Sherzai. Now, if you don't read, because some people are like, no, I don't want to read. They've all got podcasts, they've all got websites, they've all got YouTubes, and you can look at those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's very often dyslexic people don't want to pick up a book and read, and they'll use that as an excuse to not educate themselves. But like you just said, today we have so many alternative options. We don't have to read in order to get information. So in a culture that promotes fast food and sugar and convenience, how can parents take the countercultural steps to promote real nutrition in their families?
It's not easy. I will admit it's not easy, especially with the level of activities that people have their children involved with. It's just like, okay, we're going through McDonald's, we're going to eat in the car. And you know what's even harder? It's harder when you're trying to change their diet. It's lucky for me that I raised my daughters this way. So they're never used to it. They're never craving, oh, I need chicken McNuggets or something like that. So it's much easier. But again, I go back to smoothies, salads, stews, soups, all those things that you can batch cook, that you can even prepare ahead of time. And I just taught a class about 2 weeks ago. It's called Cooking for Your Grandchild. But I changed it to Cooking with Your Grandchild. Because I'll tell you, this even works at Meristem, Jess, and maybe you've seen it. We have a 2-acre organic biodynamic farm there. And when our students are actually involved with the planting, the harvesting, and the cooking, as Sammy is, they tend to eat it. They tend to eat it. And so I think that's a huge factor to get them more involved with the processing, the shopping. Like I would tell my daughter, let's pick out one food from the produce section that we've never had before, and let's try it. She's like, okay. And they weren't all hits. I mean, I'll guarantee you they weren't all hits, but it was fun to do something with. And so I would say if you can start prepping. Now, let's say you don't want to prep. There are certain companies out there that do make whole food, plant-based, ready-to-go meals. I personally don't use a microwave, but they are microwave safe. It is, it would be more expensive. But, when I was young growing up, they said businesses had to concentrate on 3 things. That's location, location, location. Now businesses have to concentrate on 3 things: convenience, 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 because that's what we're demanding. Whether it's Amazon or whatever, we want it to be convenient. People think, oh, Twyla, yeah, I give a cooking class. I have an Instant Pot. In fact, even though I only have one person living at my house, I have 2 Instant Pots. I use that for everything. I get it ready. I reheat rice. I put something on in the morning, let it cook all day. It's never burned. It's better than a slow cooker. I have an air fryer. I'm just looking at all the things. I have a food processor so I can chop things. Now my grandson does like to chop things, but I want to make it super convenient. I have to make it convenient for myself because of my schedule and what I do. So I have to make it really convenient for myself. I will steam a bag, maybe a 2-pound bag of potatoes, let it steam all day, and then I've got that for the rest of the week. And I divide it up in the little containers. I put some sprouts on each one. I make a dressing that I've made out of tofu or beans or a flavored vinaigrette. I don't use any oil when I cook or when I make food, and I don't use any dairy products. One thing about that, when you have people say, oh, that sounds so limiting, it's kind of nice in a way, It makes it almost easier to shop because you don't have to read a bunch of ingredients and oh, I don't eat that. If I see that it's got canola oil or some sort of seed oil, it's just like, forget it. Okay, move on to the next thing. So I know it's a challenge, but you know what? If we do not make time for our health, we'll be forced to make time for our illness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so true. I mean, it makes me so sad to see so many people would rather just go get surgery or be in the hospital rather than give up their delicious food, and have medications. Like you said, my mother-in-law was on, I think, 18 medications before she died. And she was a great cook, but she killed herself with her food.
That was exactly my dad. At the time, I was just sort of getting into health. I didn't realize a lot of it, but I was a follower of Dr. John McDougall. And I don't know if you've heard of him, but he had a health clinic in Santa Rosa. So my dad was having all these heart problems. And I said, Dad, I will pay for you to go to McDougall. And you just stay there a week. And he said, if I can't eat the way I want, I'd rather be dead. And then sure enough, a few months later, died of a massive heart attack 2 months before his 62nd birthday.
Wow. My husband went to the doctor recently and they took his blood pressure, as they do all the time when you go to the doctor. And his blood pressure was really high. They said it was almost high enough that they would have just prescribed him medicine, but it wasn't quite there. And he said, I don't want to be prescribed medicine, so I'm ready to change my diet. And that was 6 or 7 weeks ago. And within 5 weeks, his blood pressure dropped 40 points, which I don't know exactly what that means, but it went from
that means good job.
Right.
That means excellent.
Yeah. It went from 190 to 160 for the top, and the bottom went down as well. So, and, I was cooking 3 meals a day, or I am cooking 3 meals a day. And at first he would just whine and complain. And I said, you know what? I understand, you're going through withdrawal, you're upset, but can you not complain while I'm cooking the food? And then he, now I make him oatmeal every morning, and I make it from scratch. And I wish I knew how easy it was to make oatmeal when I was raising my kids, because I would buy those instant packs that have sugar and whatever else in them. It is so easy to just put water on a pot, pour some oats in, start stirring, and then add fresh fruit. And then he puts a little stevia in it, and I put a little maple syrup in mine now. At first, we weren't even doing that. But, he's getting used to changing his eating habits, and he's almost 55. So if someone that stubborn and that old can get used to changing their eating habits in less than 2 months, a child can do it much easier. It's just a lot of times parents don't want to hear the kids complain. And, so they give in to the fast, easy stuff. But like I said, the oats are so easy to make. I had no clue.
And that's such a good point too. And a lot of people will say, oh yeah, but if I switch, then it's going to be really expensive. First of all, they think Whole Foods, I got to shop at Whole Foods. No, you don't. You don't have to go to Whole Foods, especially since Amazon bought them out. You never have to go to Whole Foods. But you can go to Costco. I get a 5-pound bag of, because we have gluten-free oats. So we use gluten-free oats from Farmer in the Know. And it's so easy to make that. So you can even do overnight oats if you want and just leave them in the Instant Pot overnight, or you can do something like that. Much easier. And I love the point that your husband was willing to at least try something and do something different. When I taught for the Renaissance Society at Sac State, everybody was over 65. In fact, the students at Sac State called us Q-tips because we all had gray hair. But that's beside the point. And we'd be there every Friday, and it was the Renaissance Society. And it was a bunch of older people who wanted to keep learning, Jess. So one of the people who organized the classes for Renaissance saw me doing a demo at the farmer's market. They said, do you want to teach a class on plant-based living? I go, sure, what day? They go, well, it's 12 weeks and it's an hour and 45 minutes each class. I'm like, whoa, what the heck? So I said, okay, I'll try. And she said, well, what's the least amount of people you'll do it for? And I said, how about 5? She goes, and you have to register for your own class to make sure you're getting the updates. So I did. So I tried to register for my own class that I was teaching, and they said the class is full. So I called them and I say, wait, the class is full. She goes, yeah. She said, 70 people have registered and we've got 25 on the waiting list.
Oh my goodness.
I said, then get a bigger room, because who knows how long these old people have. I said, we need to get a bigger room. And so for 4 semesters, Jess, we had between 90 and 112 people, depending upon the room that Sac State gave us, all people 65 and over who wanted to change their diet, who wanted to do it. And to me, I know it's anecdotal. I know it's testimonial, but that means more to me than all these scientific studies that I look at all the time. when someone comes to me and says, I was able to get off my statins, or I was able to drop my A1C level or something like that. I mean, that, because then I hearken to think of my parents, if only they had tried that, if only my sister had tried that. And so that's what I'm saying. I'm just talking about, so the basis of this whole conversation was, if they can change, and we've been brought up on McDonald's and fast foods, yes, it will take some effort on your kids. And especially you don't want to see your kids, oh, please, mom, please, begging and stuff. But it's for their health. And as my dad's name happens to be Virgil, but that's also one of my favorite philosophers, says, your greatest wealth is health. And, I'm a big follower of Dave Ramsey. I love all of his financial study. I love everything, save your money, save your money. But I'm sorry, Mr. Ramsey, if you don't have your health, all that money in the bank is not going to do you any good, because then you can't take the cruise with your grandkids, or you can't climb the Himalayas or whatever. You need your health in addition for that, to spend that wealth.
Yeah. So we're running out of time. I have 2 questions left, if I can ask them from you. Well, my one question is, what if for parents who feel guilty because they don't have time, or they've been feeding their kids fast food, or their child is really overweight, or whatever the reason that, they are feeling guilt and shame, what words of encouragement do you have for them?
Get off the guilt trip. That's not a trip that offers you frequent flyer miles, and you don't need a vacation there. I do the same thing. I mean, I thought, my children were raised plant-based, vegan, but I think, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much pasta I gave my kids, and it wasn't gluten-free, and so different things. I mean, we can find reasons to feel guilty about something all the time. And again, my idea is, don't try to switch everything at once. That's how, now again, it was lucky for me because they were never introduced to that stuff. I mean, my grandson says, Nana, somebody at school said, I want that same birthday cake that where'd you get that birthday cake? And he said, oh, my grandma made it. It's vegan and gluten-free. And he says, she's the best cooker I know. Well, but I think, you can't have the guilt and the shame, because we have to act like we're our own doctors, if you will. And I'm not saying you need a medical degree or anything, but you need to look at your child and say, what is the best thing for them? Whether it's cutting down on the screen time, whether it's cutting out the ultra-processed food. And if you need all these scientific studies to back you up, to gain confidence, then do that. But I think you're going to notice some considerable changes once you get past the whining part. And again, whether they're 55 years old, Jess, or 5 years old, don't hang, because your husband said, oh, like he's whiny, right? I really want this, I really want that. But look at the benefits. Let's think long-term, not short-term. We don't all need an MTV attitude where everything needs to be right in front of us all the time. Think of the long-term. What's better for them in the long term?
Well, and since I took salt out of his diet, now food is starting to taste better to him. There were some little spicy goldfish I bought for him, and we took him on a trip in April, and he said they were pretty bland. And when he ate them just a couple of weeks ago, he said they had so much flavor. It's because he was no longer desensitized. So
people get worried about that. They go, well, we need sodium. If you could grow every single fruit and vegetable, if you had the right climate, and grow that in your backyard, all those foods are going to provide you with enough sodium. People say, well, what about my protein? And I say, well, think about the strongest animals you can think of. Maybe an ox, maybe a horse, maybe a gorilla. Where do they get their protein? Where are they getting their sodium? They're not going to McDonald's. They're not running to fast food, junk food. They're getting everything they need from whole foods. And that's, I think, the key right there. And you don't have to take my word for it. Take Barbara O'Neill's word for it. Take Dr. Fahey's word for it. Take Dr. Uma Naidu, who wrote the book, This Is Your Brain on Food. Add a few chia seeds, some flax seeds, some almonds, some Brazil nuts. Try the supplements, the DHA supplements. There was one other thing, probiotics. Fermented food has shown a lot of promise as far as that goes. And Dr. Furman always says, if you have a plate of food and you add salt to it, you already have a salt addiction. Because that means that you've been adding salt when your food tastes good enough just how it is. So I think that's something interesting to say too. And then I just had one other quote. The plant-based diet relieves autism symptoms. And there's a great article included in that says ultra-processed food is fueling the rise in autism.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Twyla, so much for all of your information and knowledge. I wish we had more time to talk, but maybe we can do a part 2 again in the future. And
let's do that. We'll cook together. We'll make some food together or something like that. Yeah.
Fun. I'd love that. That would be
fun. Thank you
Okay.
so much. I know I talk a lot. I know I talk fast. I just get really excited about this. And so if you want anyone to contact me, you have my contact information. Again, there's no charge or anything like that. I don't make any money off of this. I just, like I said, I'm just a Nana that likes to have fun with some good health.
Well, and I'd love to share your link for the classes that you do. So
Okay, sure. And I'll send you the links of everything that I quoted, the different things, the autism studies and things like that too. I'll go ahead and email those to you. If you're interested, I'm happy to.
That'd be wonderful.
Thank you so much. I hope we can see each other again.
Yeah, definitely. Bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye, Jess.